If you're in your 30s or early 40s, you're already losing money. Not because you're irresponsible, not because you don't earn enough, but because of decisions you don't even realize you're making. And the dangerous part is this. By the time most people notice the loss, it's already locked in. In this video, I'll show you where that loss actually starts, why it feels invisible, and how millions of people walk into it, thinking they're doing everything right. Most people believe financial problems begin later in life, when income slows down, when work becomes optional, when retirement finally arrives. That belief feels logical, but it's also the reason most losses start much earlier. In your 30s and early 40s, life usually feels stable. You're earning more than you did before. You're no longer surviving month to month. Things finally feel under control, and that sense of control is dangerous. Because this is the phase where people stop paying attention, not because they don't care, but because nothing feels urgent. Bills are paid. The paycheck arrives on time. Progress looks steady. From the outside, everything appears fine. But this is exactly when quiet losses begin. Not dramatic losses, no sudden collapse, no obvious mistake. Instead, a slow shift happens in the background. Small decisions start stacking up. Delays begin to feel harmless. Assumptions go unchallenged. Each one feels reasonable on its own. You postpone action because there's time. You rely on consistency because it feels safe. You assume future income will solve today's compromises. None of these choices feel wrong. That's the problem. The damage doesn't come from doing something reckless. It comes from repeating what feels acceptable. Inside conditions that are quietly changing, time becomes the silent factor. Not time passing, but time losing power. In your early working years, time is flexible. Small adjustments matter. Course corrections are forgiving. But as years pass, that flexibility shrinks. Options narrow, margins tighten. The cost of delay increases. Most people don't notice this shift while it's happening because nothing forces them to notice. There's no warning sign, no moment that feels like a turning point. Life simply continues. And because life continues normally, people assume everything is still on track. The real mistake isn't lack of effort. It's the belief that stability equals safety. Stability feels reassuring, but it can hide structural loss. You don't feel poorer. You don't feel behind. You don't feel like you're failing. You just feel comfortable. And comfort is rarely questioned. This is why so many people say, "I'll deal with it later." Later feels responsible. Later feels patient. Later feels rational. But later is when leverage is already fading. By the time urgency appears, flexibility is gone. What could have been adjusted quietly now requires sacrifice. And this is how long-term outcomes are shaped, not by one big mistake, but by years of small decisions, made under the assumption that nothing is wrong yet. What makes this process so difficult to notice is that it doesn't feel like failure. It feels normal. The structure around you is designed to reward routine. Show up, stay consistent, follow the path. As long as you do that, there's no reason to question anything. The system doesn't pressure you to think critically. It encourages trust. Trust that regular contributions are enough. Trust that time alone will do the work. Trust that staying on track guarantees the outcome. And for a long time it appears to work. Numbers move in the right direction. Progress looks steady. Statements feel reassuring. But beneath that surface, the conditions slowly shift. Costs rise faster than expectations. Timelines extend quietly, and assumptions that once made sense stop matching reality. The problem is that none of this happens loudly. There's no announcement, no clear signal that something changed. Everything still functions. That's why people don't react. Reaction usually requires friction, pain, urgency. But this system avoids friction early on. It delays discomfort. It smooths the experience. It makes losses feel abstract and distant. Instead of asking you to decide, it allows you to postpone. And postponement feels harmless. You're not saying no, you're just saying later. Later becomes a habit. Over time, that habit locks in assumptions that are rarely re-examined. Most people believe they're making active choices. In reality, they're following defaults, default timelines, default expectations, default promises built under conditions that no longer exist. The structure was created for a different era, different longevity, different costs, different economic pressure, but the language never updated. The promises stayed familiar. And familiarity creates comfort. Comfort reduces scrutiny. When something feels familiar, people stop asking hard questions. They assume stability equals reliability, but stability only means the process hasn't been interrupted. It doesn't mean the outcome is protected. This is why losses accumulate quietly, not because people ignore reality, but because reality doesn't demand attention yet. Everything still looks manageable. And as long as things look manageable, most people believe adjustment can wait. The system never corrects this belief. It benefits from compliance, not awareness. As long as you stay inside the structure, it continues without resistance. The cost only becomes visible when flexibility has already narrowed, and there is a moment when this process quietly crosses a line, not a dramatic moment, not a visible collapse. Nothing breaks, nothing feels urgent, but from that point forward, the rules change. What makes this moment dangerous is that it doesn't announce itself. There is no signal telling you that flexibility is disappearing. Life continues exactly as before. Work continues. Income continues. Routines remain intact. And because nothing looks different, most people assume nothing has changed, but the leverage is gone. Earlier in life, time works for you. Small adjustments compound. Minor corrections matter. Mistakes are forgiving. Time amplifies effort. But as years pass, time slowly switches sides. It stops amplifying progress and starts amplifying consequences. What once required awareness now requires intensity, longer hours, higher risk, greater exposure to uncertainty, and tolerance for error shrinks. This is why fixing it later rarely works the way people expect. Later is when every decision carries weight. Later is when recovery costs more. Later is when options are limited to what still fits inside the remaining window. Most people don't realize that this window exists at all. They believe outcomes change suddenly. In reality, outcomes drift for years. Before they become visible, the plan doesn't fail overnight. It slowly becomes rigid. What once felt adaptable turns inflexible without warning. This is why so many people look back and say the same thing: I thought I had more time. That belief feels reasonable. Nothing in daily life contradicts it. The system doesn't create urgency. It rewards patience. It normalizes delay. It treats waiting as responsibility, and waiting feels safe, as long as consequences stay abstract. But abstraction disappears eventually. At some point, the math becomes unavoidable, not because circumstances changed suddenly, but because time removed the margin. This is the stage where many people feel trapped, not trapped by poverty, trapped by limited choices. They still earn, they still function, they still appear stable, but every option now demands sacrifice. The system hasn't collapsed. It's operating exactly as designed. It allows drift. It postpones pain. It reveals consequences only when adjustment is hardest. This is not about panic. Panic arrives too late to be useful. This is about recognizing that the most dangerous phase is the one that feels normal, when nothing is wrong enough to demand attention, but enough has changed to shape the final outcome. By the time people sense pressure, the path is already narrow, and this is why so many outcomes feel inevitable in hindsight, not because